Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're in the kitchen. I am getting ready to make dinner, and tonight we are having Philly cheesesteak sandwiches. So if you want to see how I make them in the slow cooker, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, today we're having Philly cheesesteak sandwiches for supper tonight. And a couple days ago, I guess 2 days ago, I took a beef eye of round steak out of our freezer, and it's been thawing in the refrigerator. And I've been trying to think what I wanted to make with it. Now, I could easily just make a roast, but I was trying to think of a more flavorful meal. I know we love roast and stuff, but I wanted to kind of take it up a notch. So I was kind of thinking, we've got onions and peppers and stuff in the freezer, and I like to cook with what I have on hand. I don't want to go buy stuff at a grocery store just to make a meal. And so I was thinking of the things I had, and I thought, well, that would be like a Philly cheesesteak. And so I looked up on the internet different Philly cheesesteak recipes for the slow cooker, and there's all different ways of making it. And for me, I just decided that I was going to do it this way, just because for the sake of ease, and I think it will taste really good. And if it doesn't work out for some reason, it will just be a roast that's flavored really well, and we can slice it and eat it anyway. Because I'm not going to pre-slice the meat before I put it in the crock pot. I'm just going to keep it whole. Now, I'm using an eye of round, which is not a very marbled piece of meat. And so cooking it in a slow cooker helps make it softer, but it's a really good cut of meat that is, it's got a good texture if you cook it right. And we really like it. And it holds its shape really nicely too when you slice it. So I'm going to put the ingredients that I want to add into the crock pot, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to make it. At the end, we'll taste it and see if it tastes good. I don't doubt it will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my eye of round, and I don't know, this is probably 3 pounds or so. And let me get a knife here. And we had bought a large eye of round in bulk, just a whole big slab, and just cut it down into serving sizes. And then we had put them into freezer bags and had frozen it. So we have a couple of these out in the freezer. And you can look at the marbling on the meat, very little, very fine. It does have some fat on the outside here, and I might trim just a little bit of that off because I don't want it to be too fatty for the juices on this one. But we're just going to take this, just clean it up a little bit, and also that will help the seasonings to get to the meat if we don't have too much fat on it. And again, I'm leaving some, but there's a few spots where it's a little heavier. And just slicing those off. My knife needs to be sharpened, but it'll get us through it. Dogs will have a little treat there, won't they? So, whoops, I think I see another piece I want to take off right here. So here's what our meat looks like. You can see there's a little bit of fat there. I'll probably put a little slice in there so that it'll allow some of the other flavors to get into the meat. Just cut through that fat, and that way it'll be there. And the fat will give it good flavor too. So there's our piece of meat. And I am going to put, let me wipe my hands off here. I am going to use things that we had in our garden last year that we preserved, because we grow things and then preserve them and then use them throughout the winter time and for as long as they last. That way we can save on groceries, and also we have lots of really good food. So I have one sandwich bag full of red onions from our garden. And if you want to freeze onions, you just slice them or chop them however you like them and put them in Ziploc bags. I suggest you double bag them because they will be stinky and taint the food in your freezer if you don't. I even found that this year my red onions were really pungent. And even though I had double bagged them, they were still scenting up the freezer. So I finally had to get a big, I guess it would be a tall ice cream tub from like a dairy, and fill that with the Ziploc bags and close it so that my freezer would not, or so that that smell would not taint the rest of the food. I did end up taking like a big cup of baking soda and setting it in the freezer to absorb that smell, and that worked. But just be careful, especially when working with peppers and onions and any pungent vegetable. When you put it in your freezer, you don't want the foods in there to get that flavor. So just be sure you wrap it really good. So here's a bag of just a sweet white or yellow onion. And again, these are just sliced. I had sliced and chopped them, and I chose to use the sliced ones because that would be perfect for this recipe. And we like onions, and onions will cook down to hardly anything. So that's why I've got two bags. You can use whatever you want, whatever amount you want. And then I have a bag of sliced red bell peppers, and I'm going to use that whole thing. Just break them up, and I just slice them. And we use these for fajitas and things like that. Also, like when we have burgers, I will put these red peppers in on the side next to the burgers and cook them up, saute them up until soft, and they taste really good on top of the burger. So I've got that. Now let's add some garlic, and I'm just going to add a couple of cloves here because I'm also going to add some powdered garlic. And you know what? Before I get my garlic and stuff going, I probably should have, and I wasn't thinking, seasoned my meat because we want to make sure that it's flavored up nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and get salt and pepper. And I can just pull this out and put this on top, I guess. So I'm going to get some pepper. And that's probably a good tablespoon. And I am going to rub it in all over so that my meat has plenty of pepper on it. Now this is going to be in a liquid, so a lot of this is going to wash off, but it will be in that liquid and it will taste really good. I'm going to take probably a couple teaspoons of salt because this is a lot of meat, and sprinkle it all over the beef. And it's good for the vegetables in there. That will help them taste really good too. And then I am going to take some garlic powder. Like I said, we're going to add some regular garlic cloves, but I also want to add garlic powder directly to the meat. And that should be good. Okay. So I'm just going to make a little bed down here and set my meat just like that. Okay. So now let's get that garlic. Now, when you're working with raw meat, be sure that anything that you're using to cut, to wash your hands, dry your hands, all of that is washed well when you're done, because raw meat can have lots of bacteria that can grow lots of bacteria that can really make you sick. So anything that touches raw meat, be sure you wash well. Okay, so here's one thing of garlic. And I'm just going to put that right on top of the meat. This one. 2. And I have a couple real tiny ones. I'll just throw them in there. Just on top there. Then let's take a few dry onion flakes. I know we've got lots of onions in there, but we like the taste of onion in this. And I'm probably taking 2 tablespoons, sprinkling it right on the roast. I'm going to take some Worcestershire sauce. No one can pronounce it. And I'm probably going to add 2 tablespoons, and I'm just going to drizzle it over the meat. And I'm not going to wash off the onions, the dried onions. I'm just drizzling it on there. And then I believe the final ingredient, I'm going to use some beef stock, or this is beef broth. Either one is fine. And I'm going to use the whole thing. It will be great for a juice to dip your sandwich into, just like a French dip. And I'm not pouring it directly on top of my meat because I've got my onions and garlic on there, and I want them to stay right now. And I'll just get a little sprinkle on top just to moisten them. And as it cooks, the juices will come out and it will help cook that. Okay, so I've got everything in here. I'm going to put this, because I need this to get done, I'm going to put it on high, and it's going to have to cook 4 to 6 hours, because that's a pretty good sized piece of meat and the veggies in there are frozen. But we're going to take it out when it's completely done. It doesn't have to fall apart. In fact, we'll see what it comes out to be, but I don't mind slicing it to make the sandwiches with. I think that will be really good. So I'm going to put this in the slow cooker, 4 to 6 hours on high. And when I come back, we're going to make some hoagie rolls. All right, my mess is all cleaned up from our Philly cheesesteaks, and that is cooking behind me. And now I've got everything out to make our hoagie buns, or our hoagie rolls. Now, I have never made hoagie rolls before, but I enjoy trying new recipes. And a lot of times it's out of necessity, because I have certain things that I want to use up that's in our freezer or that we have canned. And so I've got to find something that I can make with it. But I love trying new recipes, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but we're always learning new things. So this hoagie roll recipe is from Oh Sweet Basil, and I will put a link to this recipe so that you can get traffic to her blog, and it will be there. So it will be in the description box. Easy hoagie rolls is this recipe. So she has a single batch that makes 8 hoagies. And whenever I make bread, I like to make usually a double batch, just because it's quite a bit of effort to make bread, as far as letting it rise and doing all that stuff and keeping an eye on it. And if I'm going to make it, I might as well make more and just stick it in the freezer. So here's what we're going to need. I've got warm water. I've got flour. She uses just all-purpose, but I have the bread flour, and I like to use it so it doesn't go bad. I buy it in bulk, And so anytime I make bread, I use bread flour. We've got some honey, butter, sugar, salt, and she uses instant yeast, but if you want to use regular yeast, it will be fine. It might just be a little slower to rise, but it will be fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, again, this is double her recipe. So if you want the single batch, which makes 8 rolls, just look at the recipe there. I will be telling you what I'm using for the double batch. So I'm going to take 3 cups of warm water. Now don't use hot water because you don't want to cook your yeast. You just want to warm it up so it starts activating. Then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of the instant yeast. And I buy my instant yeast or all of my yeast in the blocks, and I put them in jars after I open them, and I keep them in the refrigerator. You can also keep them in the freezer. I find that mine do fine in the refrigerator because I will go through it fairly quickly. But if you don't cook bread very often, just stick it in your freezer and it will be good for a long time. So 2 tablespoons. 1, and I'm just sprinkling it on top of the water. 2. Then we're going to use 2 tablespoons of sugar, just regular sugar, and this will get it activating and bubbly. Then we need 2 tablespoons of honey, and let's get 2 tablespoons out, and I'm just going to eyeball it. If I get more, it'll be more sweet. If I get less, it'll be less sweet. 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons. All right. Oops. We also need 2 tablespoons of salt. Yes, tablespoons. Again, it's a tablespoon for just 8, but 2 tablespoons for what we're making. And that sounds like a lot of salt, but it's a lot of bread. And this is really the only thing that's going to give it flavor. So I'm just using, and this is just pink Himalayan. And I'm going to have to get just a little bit more. I'll just use a little bit of kosher salt that I have by the stove. Okay, 2 tablespoons. Then we need to mix this up and let it set for about 5 to 10 minutes. Just kind of give it a little whir. And this will also tell us if our yeast is good. If it doesn't start getting foamy and bubbly, our yeast is no longer good and we need to use some new yeast. So we'll let that set. And while that's setting, we are going to be using about 7.5 cups of flour, and we're also going to be using some cold butter, and it's going to be 6 tablespoons. And that's what makes this hoagie roll a little different than like French bread. We are going to be cutting this into like tablespoon sizes, and we're going to be dropping that cold butter once the batter has mixed up and the dough has mixed up. And that, I think, is what's the difference between the hoagie rolls and maybe like a French bread or Italian bread. So we're going to let this set. I'm going to cut 6 tablespoons of butter, and then I'll come back when this is bubbly. All right, it's been about 6 or 7 minutes, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. This yeast is certainly good. So we've got lots of foam going on there. You can see that. And we are ready to start mixing in our flour. Tell you what, yesterday I finally did the job that I was putting off for several weeks. My refrigerator needed cleaning. I guess both of our refrigerators. We have one in the kitchen and one out here in the laundry room. But they were needing to be cleaned. And I had kept putting them off. Just I didn't have enough time because I knew it was going to take a while. And of course, we'll clean out the refrigerators and take food out and kind of wipe down quickly our shelves and stuff. But this was a major deep cleaning. But right now in the laundry room, we have an old kitchen porcelain sink, and we keep a tub there to put scraps in and stuff as I cook. And then we give it to whatever the dogs can eat, give it to the dogs and the cats. And then the rest we put in our compost pile. And right now it is just piled high with food that needs to be taken outside. Andy's got to do that this evening. But I've been continuing today to take a few things out of the pantries and add to that pile. But I tell you, the refrigerator is one thing that I dread cleaning. I don't know if it's because, you know, I have to decide, is this still good or is it old? And a lot of times I don't know. If Andy opened it, I don't know if he just opened it or if he opened it 2 months ago. But we have a lot of jars because we have a lot of food that we preserve, and also we forget to label them when we put them back, because we usually change the lids. We forget to label them when we put them back in the fridge. And so it's just like, well, I don't even know what kind of sauce this is. And so you end up dumping it. You hate to see a lot of food dumped. And I guess that's probably one of the things that makes me not want to have to make those decisions. But I tell you, when I opened the refrigerator just a second ago when I was getting stuff, it was like, oh, it's so clean and cheery and bright in here. And it's just amazing how much more space we have. But I started off, and then when Andy got home, he jumped in to help. We took all the shelves out. We just scrubbed the inside, scrubbed the doors, scrubbed everything, the freezer and the refrigerators on both of them, and then just went through what we needed to keep. And I tell you, our fridges are really empty right now, so I guess I need to go to the grocery store and get a few things. But it feels good to get those cleaned out, and I know exactly what I have in there now. But anyway, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there just like me that don't like to clean a refrigerator. So let's go ahead and get these hoagies made. I think maybe cleaning out the chest freezers is even worse. I just hate to see meat that I didn't remember having or that got stuck way down at the bottom and thinking, oh, that's no good anymore, we got to toss it. I just hate that because it was really good meat and we paid good money for it. But it's just money. All right, let's make our hoagies. So we're ready to add our flour, and it says here, and actually I made a mistake because I added the salt into my yeast mixture, and I know salt usually inhibits the growth of yeast. It kind of slows it down, but it hasn't affected this. So if you're making this, follow directions, don't follow me. You're going to add the salt when you add the flour, but that's okay. This is working. My yeast is bubbling. So we are going to add our flour, and they want you to add all of it, and you're going to mix it on 4 minutes at low speed. So I have to add 7.5 cups of flour. 1, and I just put this in here so it's nice and fluffy. 2, I keep my flour in the big, I don't know, is it 5-gallon tubs with the lids? And so I just transfer it into these smaller size to keep it handy. Okay, I hope that's 4. I'm going to go 7, but I need to add 7.5, but I'm going to see what it looks like, and I hope I counted it right because I start talking and then I lose what I'm doing. So let's just put this on low, and let's put the bowl up, and we're going to mix it for 4 minutes. So I'll bring you back when 4 minutes is up. Okay, so while you were gone, I mixed it for 4 minutes on low, and I would assume that would be 1 or 2 on your mixer. It doesn't say what it is, but just on low. And then it was time to add your salt. So at that point, you would add your salt, and then you'd mix it on medium for another 3 minutes. So I've checked it. I ended up adding the other half a cup of flour, and because it looked like I probably needed it. So I added altogether 7.5 cups of flour, and it's been mixing now for 7 minutes, 4 minutes on low, 3 minutes on medium, and we've got a nice soft looking dough. Let me see. I can show you. So there's what our dough looks like. It's a bit sticky, but it cleans the sides when it is mixing. But once it stops, the sides start getting stuck, or the dough starts getting stuck to the pan. So she doesn't, or whoever it is that made this recipe and shared it, does not say what to look for in your dough. So we are just going to go ahead. I really like to have directions that kind of tell you what you're looking for, because flour can be very different depending on the humidity. And unless you weigh it, it may be that my 7.5 cups would be different than somebody else's 7.5 cups. So in the summertime, it may be that it's more humid and there's more moisture in it. In the wintertime, it's drier. It may need more moisture to get it to a certain texture. So we're just going to follow the recipe and cross our fingers. Now is the time we're going to add the cold butter. So what it says is, finally add the cold butter, 1 tablespoon at a time, and mix for another minute or 2 after each addition. Continue to mix until no pieces of butter remain. This is going to be odd to see that butter slapping around in there, but trust me, as you mix, the dough will firm up and be silky, and all the butter will be incorporated. So we're going to be mixing for a pretty good amount of time. Again, if you're just adding 3 tablespoons, it would be mixing less. So I might add 2 tablespoons at a time, just because I have more batter, more dough. So let's get this started. I'm going to turn it on 2. I think I'm just going to put it on 2 and add my butter and let it mix about a minute or 2 after each butter. So I'll add 2 tablespoons at a time for a total of 6 for doubling the recipe. Okay, so I will tell you, she's right. That butter starts just flapping around on the sides, and it's like it's not incorporating. And then it starts getting incorporated. This is cold butter, and I think when it starts going around in the bowl, in the dough, it starts warming up, and pieces of it and parts of the oil are getting absorbed. So that's what to look for. I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll bring you back when I have all the butter incorporated. Okay, it has all incorporated. Make sure there's no butter flipping around in there. It is all incorporated. And it is a very soft dough and sticky. So here's what the dough looks like. Okay. The butter, I think, helps it from not sticking too bad to your fingers, but there is some stick. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a bowl, or I use this big dish pan. And if you want to know how to make, this is a jar bonnet, but it's for a bowl, so it's a bowl cover. You make these the exact same way as you make the jar bonnets that I have on my tutorial. There's a video. If you check my channel, you can find it. It says jar bonnets. But if you want a bowl cover that you can put your dough and cover it with this cloth, there is a tutorial on how to make them. You just make a bigger circle for your bowls. So we're going to fill, or not fill, we're going to spray our pan with oil, whatever kind you like to use. And since this is a pretty sticky dough, I'm giving it a pretty good coat. And then we're going to turn out this dough into this pan. Get it all out. And this little thing is really handy when you're making bread. It's a KitchenAid one, but they probably make different brands. But it really scrapes, it forms to the bowl, and it scrapes it out nicely. And so we're just going to turn this dough over so that it is oiled on all sides. And there we have it. And then I'm going to cover it with a towel, or if you have a bowl cover. And since our house is fairly cool in the winter time, I'm going to put this in my oven with a 4-cup measuring cup, and I put water in that, and then I put it in the microwave and get it boiling. And then I put the dough and that 4 cups of boiling water into my oven, and that gives it a nice humidity and warmth. And I also turn the light on in my oven. Sometimes if it's real cold, I'll turn it on for just a minute just to kind of take the chill out of the oven. But you don't want it to rise too fast, so you don't want it to be too hot. So just let it have a nice warm temperature to rise in. And she says let it rise for an hour or two. I would say until doubled. She doesn't say here, but when we think it's ready, we'll take it out and we'll bring it out and start forming our rolls with it. So I'll bring you back when it's ready to make rolls. Okay, it looks like our dough has risen, and it's been an hour and a half, 2 hours. So we're just going to punch it down. It's still a very soft dough. And I'm just pulling it off the sides like so. It's got a lot of stretch. The one thing I'm worried about with this dough being this thin is whether it's going to hold the shape. Usually a hoagie is not flat like a burger bun. It's more lifted. So I'm hoping this will shape right. Otherwise, if it doesn't, next time I'll know to add more flour. So according to the directions, if you're making a single batch, you would shape this in 4 to 8 hoagies, depending on the size of the hoagie you want. So I'm going to see how big I'd like to have it. I'm also going to use a little flour here, and maybe that will help stiffen up the dough just a little bit. I've got parchment lined cookie sheets here ready to put the dough on once I get it formed. So let's see. And again, like I said, it's a little bit sticky. So I don't know. Again, I'm going to add a little flour to it from sticking. I am going to then roll it into kind of a little mound. See how much I've got here. This looks like about a 1/3 cup of dough. And I think that will make a good size. We don't like them real big. We'd rather have more meat and less bun. So let me just, and I think I think I'm going to incorporate a little more flour into these as I roll them out. So I'm going to just roll them out like I would a loaf of bread. And I'm just going to use my hands since I don't need them very big. And just kind of make a long rectangular shape. And I've got a lot of elasticity in this dough, so it's stretching back pretty quickly. If you can't work it and it's stretching back real quick, you can let it set for a minute and then you can do it again and it'll be a little more kinder. So we can make this dough do what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm just going to roll like a jelly roll or a cinnamon roll. Just roll it up like that. I'm going to pinch together and then I'm going to turn sides in. So basically what I'm doing is I'm making a baby loaf of bread. And just like that. So I'm going to put a little bit of cornmeal, and somebody asked why I put cornmeal on my pans when I'm making like Italian or French bread, because it actually, I like the texture it gives on the bottom, plus it helps it come up easier, it doesn't stick. So that's just a traditional way of doing it. So let's do another one. And I'll add some flour. Knead it just a little bit to get it into shape. And flatten it out like a pancake, except make it longer, more rectangular. Feels a lot like pizza dough. Then we're going to roll it like a jelly roll. And I do caution you, when you're rolling it like a jelly roll, you probably don't want to have the flour like I have here, because sometimes that will make it get air bubbles inside there and separate. And we're going to pinch it together and pull the middles in and under, and there we have another one. So I'm going to see how many I can get, and I'll bring you back. Okay, I finished rolling out all of the hoagies. These are a little bit smaller than these that I just finished rolling. Um, these are starting to puff up really nicely, so I don't think they're going to have to rise very long. And I've just sprayed them with a little oil on top just to keep them moist. And I am going to cover them with a tea towel and just let them sit until they're doubled, and then I will be putting them in an oven. All right, it's been an hour, and I think we are going to get the small loaves in. I think they have doubled in size. I'll put these in after, the larger ones in afterwards. I've got 2 tablespoons of milk here, and the recipe calls for this size batch would be 2 egg whites, but since eggs are so expensive and we really are trying to reduce the amount of eggs we're using, I'm going to use a whole egg and it will be fine. A lot of breads go ahead and have you use the whole egg plus water to give them that gloss. So I'm going to use a whole egg and 2 tablespoons of milk. And I'm going to whisk those together. Just make sure it's all well mixed. Then I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to gently brush these with this mixture. You don't want to push on them too hard. You don't want them to deflate. And if you over rise them, they will deflate when you touch them. So that's one thing you have to kind of watch. Don't over rest your dough. They will flatten out. You need them to hold their shape when you're touching them. I'm anxious to see how these turn out. They look really good. And you can see I've got some that are bigger, and this little guy right here is just a baby. Cute little baby. Okay. Now once you have them brushed with the egg mixture, we're going to slit them. And you can use a razor blade. I think I've sharpened this knife really good, so I think it's going to be good, but you want something very sharp. And you're going to slit down the top of each roll. So you're just going to do a cut like that. And you don't want to put pressure on it because you don't want to deflate it. But if your blade's sharp enough, it will pop it open. Just do it very gently. And I chose to put my egg mixture on first just to make sure I didn't deflate my rolls after I cut them. She has you put your egg mixture on afterwards, which is fine too, whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay. And they're just going to pop open nicely. So I'm putting this into a preheated oven that is preheated to 375 degrees. They are going to cook for about 16 to 22 minutes, depending on the heat of your oven and the size of your rolls. So I will bring you back when I bring them out of the oven. Okay, here's the first batch that came out. My paper started sliding and I had to catch it. So I squashed a couple of them, but I think they look good overall, and they sure do smell good too. So I'll let these cool. In fact, I'll let them sit here for just a minute and then I'll put them on a wire rack to cool. I put the bigger ones in and I'll bring those out and share those with you when they're done. And here are the larger ones. I just took those out and they look really nice too. So all of the hoagies are now out, and I'm going to bring it back in just a minute. We're going to slice up that beef. All right, here is our meat. And I did, because of the frozen vegetables and stuff, I did cook this at least 6 hours, probably even more, because they were all frozen and I wanted to get them nice and cooked down. Also, I would take and place the onions and the peppers up on top of the beef, and that way it kept it from drying out, plus it enabled those to get roasted a little bit, which helped as well. So let's just take this out and let's just see what we got here. Rinse off the garlic on the top there, and let's pick it up. set that aside for just a minute. We'll see how well this will cut. Okay, when you're cutting meat, you want to cut across the grain, and so the grain is going this way. So we are just going to see what we got here. You'll need a sharp knife. Ooh, that looks nice. It smells really good. And, you know, even a thin knife helps you get thinner strips. So, you can shave it really thin if you need to. I like to have mine quite thin. So we'll just see how thin we can keep it. And if you have a meat slicer, you can easily do it on that too. And I have one, but I'm not getting it out for this. This is working just fine. If we had a really big one, it would be worth the trouble and the cleaning of it. But I think I'm just going to leave the rest of it whole to keep it kind of moist. Let's see what it tastes like. That is really good. Okay, so we are going to try to assemble us a Philly cheesesteak hoagie. All right, so I'm just going to use one of the smaller hoagies. And if you like to have horseradish sauce or mayonnaise on yours, you can definitely use that. Now these rolls are really a soft texture and very nice texture. I was kind of surprised because usually the hoagies I get from the store are more of a dry bread, but these are going to be much better. And usually you use provolone, and I thought I had some provolone in the freezer, but I didn't. I do have some shredded provolone, Italian style cheese. It's also got a little bit of, I believe, maybe Parmesan and a little mozzarella in there too. So we're just going to make a little bed of it right there. Then we're going to take some of our meat and lay it like that. And then of course we probably want to add a little bit more cheese. And then let's take some of our onions and peppers. These look so good. Just like that. And I've got this spoon that is letting the moisture out, or the liquid out. It's a slotted spoon. That looks so good, doesn't it? I'll put just a little more cheese on top. Let that become nice and melty. And then we'll put this like that. And we're gonna have to give this a taste. So I'm gonna move the camera up. All right, so I've got it right here, and I put a little au jus, some of the juice right here in a cup. I'm gonna have to set the plate down. So this is big. All right, I'm gonna take a bite. Probably need to use a fork. Mm-mm-mm. That is really good. This tastes really good. You haven't had a real Philly cheesesteak until you've made your own. These are delicious. I hope you get a chance to make them. If you like this video, please consider sharing. I'd also appreciate if you would like and share. And as always, I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.